And just getting the recording started. Hi, friends. Welcome. You don't see yourself. The truth is, you will only see me. It's a webinar style, so you'll just see me. However, if you would go ahead and put in the chat, it's Sherry. Sherry's just demonstrated how you could put in the chat a note for everybody else who's here. This is a great way to communicate back and forth during the program. If you want to just say hello right now, maybe say where you're from. And also, if you have a question as we go along, you could put it in the Q&A, which I'm going to be more likely to see. The Q&A bar is at the bottom, and I'll probably have a better chance of seeing questions that come in through the Q&A versus the chat, which sometimes I'm not able to keep up with. But I'm looking right now and I see so many folks coming in from Seattle and Oakland and Amesbury and Montrose, from India, wow, and from California and Taos, Albany, Pinedale, Wyoming, New Hampshire, Longmont. Thanks, friends. Thanks all for showing up to an hour of exploring vulnerability. And I have been longing to do this particular, I like to call them thought shops, for, oh, I think at least a year. The reason I call it a thought shop, I'll say, is because it is just kind of a unidirectional me offering lots of ideas. I'll read lots of poems and talk about them, and I'll offer writing invitations that come out of those poems. You will tomorrow get an email that has links to all of the poems that I read tonight and also has all of the writing invitations. So you don't have to do anything if you want. My hope is that what you can do is just relax and listen and let the poems come and do all the work and wash over you. And then when you can see them again tomorrow in your own time, you could maybe watch the video again. You'll get the recording of the video and you can put it on pause and do your own writing then, or just do it on your own. Find the poems, read the invitations that I'll send you, and have a chance to play around with your own writing practice that way. Or perhaps you're not in it for the writing part at all. You just want to listen to poems. It's a great joy of mine also. So I'm so glad you're joining me tonight. Thank you. The subject, essential vulnerability. I'm going to start by, well, singing a poem from Hafez. This is a version by Danny Ladinsky, and it speaks to vulnerability. How did the rose, how did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? And maybe you too have felt like that rose, just tight in its bud, thinking, oh, how do I ever open? How does that happen? Is that possible? Isn't the world a little too dangerous for that right now? I love the answer in that it felt the encouragement of light against its being. So I hope tonight, if I had a hope for tonight, it would be that this is an invitation to open that this hour together is that light against your being that says maybe just this much, or maybe this, maybe this. It's the time of peonies right now, friends, and perhaps you too have just been inspired by peonies to, oh my goodness, I want to open like that. So just the first a few thoughts about vulnerability before I jump into sharing some poems. And why was it such an important idea for me to think, let's talk about this, let's find poems about this, let's explore this in our own writing? Vulnerability comes from the Latin vulnus, which means to be wounded and able to be wounded. And that doesn't actually sound all that great, does it? Um, my own experience, especially around poetry, is that poetry is an opportunity to explore all of it, all of it. And that when, I'm speaking about myself, when I am able to be open to it all, or as my teacher Joy Sharp would say, can you say yes to it all? Can you say yes to life as it is? I feel like that is the real essence of vulnerability. Saying yes to things even when they are deeply painful, even when they hurt. How do we say yes to that? And why would we ever do that? My own experience is that when we are open to the full breadth of experience, and I'm guessing, friends, that you know this in your own lives too, that the more open we are to what is most difficult to meet, to that same degree, we are open to what is most beautiful, what is most joyful, what is most delightful. And that even in that opening, the opening itself somehow, the vulnerability itself somehow becomes the real gift. So I'm going to share one more thought about this. Gabor Maté wrote in The Myth of the Normal, nothing in nature becomes itself without being vulnerable. The mightiest tree's growth requires soft and supple shoots, just as the hardest shelled crustacean must first molt and become soft. So I think about this, that it's in fact, it's essential to our own becoming. It's essential to our who we are and how we become more ourselves, or even maybe more properly, how we become less who we thought we were and more what life is. So I'm going to first lead us into this idea of how do we, especially when we're in a comfortable place, how do we open up to our own vulnerability? And I want to do that by sharing this gorgeous poem by Jane Kenyon. I'm guessing many of you know it. It's called Otherwise. And then we're going to use her poem as a launching off place to write one of our own, in which I'll give you a little line that you can fill in and put your line in the chat bar. And in this way, we'll create kind of a group poem. And also say, by the way, that if anything is going wrong during this time together, my amazing assistant, Sarah Dedman, is also here. You can find her in the chat bar and send her a direct chat and just say, hey, help, help, and she can help you out. So thank you, Sarah, for being here. So we're going to start with this poem, Otherwise, by Jane Kenyon, really exploring how do we get in touch with our vulnerability in a moment when we think, I'm okay. Otherwise, I got out of bed on two strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day I know it will be otherwise. So, the invitation, friends, is to think of a moment of ease or beauty that you experienced just today, right? I walked in a meadow full of penstemon. It could have been otherwise. I sat down to breakfast with my children. It could have been otherwise. So go ahead and put that first line, something beautiful, something that was easy for you. And by the way, I see that you need me to turn up my volume, so I'm going to work on that while you start putting these into the chat bar. Um, Something beautiful, something full of ease. It's already pretty high, but now my microphone is all the way up. It can't get any higher than that. All right. So I'm going to start just reading the things that people are putting into the chat bar, and we'll create this poem that invites vulnerability just by knowing that in any given moment we are capable of being wounded. I held my sweet butterscotch tabby against my chest and felt her purr. It could have been otherwise. I watched my backyard alight with fireflies. It could have been otherwise. To protect myself, I stayed quiet for 4 hours and knelt in the garden and picked ripe strawberries, the sweetness of blueberries. I sat with my purring old cat on my lap. It could have been otherwise. I looked into the eyes of my beloved. It could have been otherwise. I nuzzled with my puppy. I had such a beautiful lunch with my dear friend. I listened to summer interns tell me of their joy and woke without pain. Oh, the ease of breathing, and it could have been otherwise. I dared to share my story. I savored garlic scape pesto. I felt such camaraderie with the women in the locker room. I shared thoughts and laughter in a book club today. It could have been otherwise. I picked the first blueberries of the season in my garden and sketched a sunflower and walked beneath the clear blue sky. Ate dinner with my husband and walked through the dawn streets, silence and flowers all around me. I cried. It could have been otherwise. I was hungry and there was a sun-warmed apple fallen from my neighbor's tree. I said hello to the lake this morning and listened to the hummingbird song. It could have been otherwise. I laid in bed in the early darkness this morning and walked the green belt that was swaddled in cotton. I sat in the sun in my beautiful sweet garden and painted a simple picture of life as it is. It could have been otherwise. Oh, sweet friends, I see that there are at least 44 more that I did not get to, and I'm sorry if I did not read yours, but I also want you to notice just the beauty, just all of that beauty that was pulled in that does come, by the way, from being vulnerable. It's that willingness to open, to notice what is here, and that's how we notice all those beautiful things. This is also how we notice, wow. I am so grateful it was this way because it could have been otherwise. And I do feel like the more in touch we are with our vulnerability, the more we are grateful for exactly what we have. I will send you also, by the way, the chat so that you'll have everything that was put into that chat bar and see how easy it is to create that gorgeous poem. And you could read all of these beautiful, easy pieces that reads like the best news you've ever heard, right? Way better than the news on the radio. So once we think about vulnerability, I think I notice in myself how much I value it, how important it is to me. And the next poem, I think, does a beautiful job of exploring it, but not romanticizing it, of honoring our vulnerability and honoring the value in staying with what is painful, um, even, but not trying to make it sound like, oh yay, oh yay, it hurts, because we all know that's not how it is. But how do we honor that vulnerability? So this is Blessing for the Brokenhearted by Jan Richardson. She's an artist, writer, and painter, and also a Methodist ordained minister. And she begins with a quote from Henry David Thoreau: "There is no remedy for love but more love." Let us agree for now that we will not say the breaking makes us stronger, or that it is better to have this pain than to have done without this love. Let us promise we will not tell ourselves, oh, time will heal the wound, when every day our waking opens it anew. Perhaps for now it can be enough to simply marvel at the mystery of how a heart so broken can go on beating, as if it were made precisely for this, as if it knows the only cure for love is more of it, as if it sees the heart's sole remedy for breaking is to love still, as if it trusts that its own persistent pulse is the rhythm of a blessing we cannot begin to fathom, but will save us nonetheless. Blessing for the Brokenhearted by Jan Richardson. I can't tell you, and maybe you felt it too, what a relief it is when I read those lines. Those first lines, let's agree for now. We're not going to say that the breaking will make us stronger. Let's not try and put this pink bow on what it's like to be wounded. It's awful to be wounded. And can we marvel at the mystery of how a broken heart can go on beating? That line gets me every time. Isn't it astonishing what it is to know that we're capable of being so deeply hurt and brokenhearted and somehow go on living, and somehow through that vulnerability? I love how she begins with no way, nothing to do but love. And someone said to me just yesterday, there's no way through the sorrow but sorrow. But to meet it, to show up for it, and then, as she says, the only cure for love, more of it, as if it sees the heart's sole remedy for breaking is to love still and to trust our own persistent pulse is the rhythm of a blessing that we cannot begin to fathom. So if you wanted to do some of your writing of your own, and again, all of these links to these poems and to the prompts are going to be coming to you in your inbox tomorrow, along with a recording of this video. Here's some ideas. One is begin with this line: how can a heart so broken go on beating? Just write from there. Maybe writing into an answer, or maybe writing a lot more questions that have no answers. Another idea is to write a blessing. I love the way Jan Richardson writes these beautiful blessings, and you could write a blessing. They often begin with may you or may we. Write a blessing, perhaps for yourself, perhaps for others who are willing to be vulnerable. Bless the vulnerable. May you, and then just what would your blessing for them be? It can be really difficult sometimes to be vulnerable, especially if we value our identity that is the opposite of vulnerable, right? I'm strong, I'm courageous, I'm tough, I don't cry. And I do feel like there's this part where if we try to hold on to that identity, it can be almost impossible to see how we could be vulnerable, which is how I came to fall in love with this next poem, Bluebird by Charles Bukowski. It was brought to me by a student of mine, and when she said we were going to be reading a Charles Bukowski poem, I'm going to just be honest, friends, and I thought, oh no, yuck. I don't want to read another poem about whiskey and whores. And I had this bias. I had a pretty strong bias against it. Just heads up, the whiskey and the whores are going to show up, but so does the bluebird. And my goodness, I love this poem. Charles Bukowski, born in Germany, he's known for his rawness and his poems, and he died back in 1994. Bluebird. There is a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out. But I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There is a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out. But I pour whiskey on it and inhale cigarette smoke, and the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know he's in there. There is a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? Do you want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There is a bluebird in my heart. He wants to get out. But I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes, when everybody's asleep. I say, I know you're there, so don't be sad. And then I put him back. But he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And we sleep together like that, with our secret pact and it's nice enough to make a man weep. But I don't weep. Do you? That was Bluebird by Charles Bukowski, a poem that it turns out I absolutely love. I love the idea that when we put on our most tough exterior, no matter how tough, there's still this tender sweetness inside that we might try to shut down, and still it comes out. And maybe we find the place where it's safe enough to let it alone in the dark. And maybe even after we know it's there, we still continue to tell the story like he does at the end of the poem. But I don't weep. Do you? What is that most tender part of ourselves, that most vulnerable part of ourselves that that's there even when we aren't wearing even when we are wearing our tough person masks? I'm thinking now, I went for a walk today with my friend Corinne Platt, and years ago we did a performance piece for the Literary Burlesque Festival here in Telluride, in which we talked about when we first met each other, how nervous we were about each other and how much we didn't quite trust the other person. We were jealous of the other person, or we just projected a lot of things onto the other person. And we laughed today as we were remembering this performance art piece that we did, in which we both were wearing all of the accoutrement that the other person thought about us. So I had her all dressed up in, sports gear that made her like this kind of a, Olympic winning goddess. And she had put me into some kind of a tiara and a ball gown. But over the course, as we continued to share this performance art piece about all the ways that we had, all the masks that the other person had on, most of them we had projected, but some of them that we'd put on ourselves. And how, as we became friends, they all came off. They all came off. And how sweet it is when we realize, oh, I can take off all those masks, all those things I was projecting, all those ways I thought I had to show up in the world, and just notice, where's the bluebird? Where's our inner bluebird? So, a writing invitation out of this is to think of what vulnerable animal or maybe plant could be in your heart. And perhaps even just steal Charles Bukowski's first line: there is a bluebird in my heart. There is a dove in my heart. There is a peony in my heart. What does it want to do? How do you know it's there? How did it get there? Does it ever come out? What would happen if it got out? What do you have to say to it? That's one idea. Another game I like to play often, even with kids, but with adults too, is this idea of I seem to be, but really I am, and just filling in those blanks. I seem to be tough, but really I'm soft. I seem to be a tiger, but really I'm a bluebird. You can make a list of these or just explore one and notice which one is more vulnerable. Maybe you present more vulnerably, right? I seem to be a puppy, but really I'm a coyote. Um, so just be curious about, if you play with these, what does it have to teach you about your own vulnerability? And the last idea is just to write about an animal or plant or something vulnerable that you see in someone else's heart. How do you know it's there? And what do you wonder about it? Oh, Kara says, vulnerability is what appears when we stop trying to be in control. This is a really beautiful statement about what is vulnerability. That's a beautiful definition. Thank you for that. How do we get into it? I thought I'd share this poem by my beloved friend Greg Kimura, who died, it's been a while, maybe almost 10 years. And it's a fearless poem about how to meet our own vulnerability, called A Sacred Wine by Greg Kimura. Sit with the pain in your heart, he said. Hold it like a sacred wine in a golden cup. The wine may break you, and if it does, let it. To be human is to be broken, and only from brokenness can one be healed. The ancestors say the world is full of pain, and each is allotted a portion. If you do not carry your share, then others are forced to carry it for you. And the suffering you bring to the world is your sin, but the suffering you bring to yourself will be your hell. Sit with the pain in your heart, he said. Hold it there, like a sacred wine in a golden cup. What really difficult, beautiful, simple advice. Sit with the pain in your heart. And that, I think, is a great starting place to write a poem. They can call it Sit with the Pain in Your Heart, he said, and respond to that. What does that bring up for you when someone suggests that? That's one idea. Or another is to write about something very difficult for you to sit right with right now. What do you not, what pain do you most not want to sit with? Spend 5 minutes sitting with it, not writing, just sitting. And you can set a timer for 5 minutes. I'm just going to sit with it for these 5 minutes. And then write about that. What was it like to sit with that pain? What did it feel like in your body? How did you hold that pain? And just bring as much curiosity, and compassion to yourself as you can as you do this. I'm going to just say, friends, that I am aware that we're talking about vulnerability and that it's not easy. And that as we meet our vulnerability with paper and pen, one of the most curious things to me is that things will show up that we did not expect. Just because they show up does not mean you have to meet them. I always feel like I offer this little disclaimer that writing is one of the most courageous things we can do, because when we sit down to write, we do not know what will happen. Arthur Z is a Chinese American poet, and he says that one of the most important pieces about writing is the vulnerability, because we don't know necessarily where it's going and anything can happen. And so I invite you to know that you don't have to write about it. If it shows up and it's too much, say, okay, not now. And just saying yes to your no. This is also so brave, right? So just giving you full permission to know you don't have to. You don't have to meet it just because it showed up. Um, let's see. It sounds like Beth is having a hard time hearing. I think it might just be you, Beth, just because I'm getting a lot of other comments that are in the chat bar. So I don't know if Sarah might be able to respond to Beth and help you troubleshoot how you might be hearing better. So in the beginning, we started with a poem about how the encouragement, how did the rose ever open its heart, give to the world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light. So I just feel like any program on vulnerability must include paradox and curiosity. And here we come to the paradox. I thought I'd include another poem about how do we meet our vulnerability, not through the light, but through the dark. And this is Wendell Berry. He's a very famous novelist, activist, poet from Kentucky. And I'm going to sing this one, To Know the Dark. I don't know, friends, who wrote this tune. I just learned it last week, and I looked it up and tried to find it, and I cannot find who wrote the tune. I found a place that said it was by so-and-so, and it was wrong. So I don't know. If you do know who wrote this tune, I would love to know too. To Know the Dark by Wendell Berry. To go in the dark with the light is to know the light. To know the dark, go without sight, and find that the dark too blooms and sings, and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. To know, to go in the dark with the dark. To go in the dark with light is to know the light. To know the dark, go without sight, and find the dark too blooms and sings, and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. Boy, that feels like a poem to me that is so willing to touch what is most vulnerable, to go in without sight that we rely on so much and just to meet that. Um, sit with the pain in your heart, he said, like Greg Kimura says. So I just thought how important to offer. We offered how do we bring the encouragement of light, but also how do we bring the encouragement of the dark? This next poem is by me. And I'm thinking about how when we are vulnerable, it requires a certain trust in life itself. And I was teaching last week, and one of my students said, I don't trust life. And I thought, that's right. We can't trust life to do what we want. We can't trust life to make it so that it's sunny when we're having a picnic because it was important to us. No, we can't trust that. But we can trust that if we go out and there's a picnic and it pours rain, that's exactly what needed to happen. And that there is, that we're going to show up in that moment just as we would have shown up in another moment, that it's asking us to show up in this other way. And so it's a strange thing to say, I trust life. Yes, I totally trust life. But do I trust it to do what I want? Not one bit. Do I trust life to show up and do whatever work needs to be done so that I can be in service to life? I do trust that. I do trust that. In that the most difficult times of my life, things I would never ever ask for, things that felt like, when I suppose you could go and say, why me? No. Those moments, as one of my poetic heroes, Gregory Orr would say, not to make the loss beautiful, but to make the loss the place where beauty starts, where the heart understands for the first time the nature of its journey. That I trust. I trust that when we completely show up, that life is doing what life will do and helping us show up as exactly as we need to, even when we're wounded. So this is a poem that's really exploring that. It's called Growing Trust, and it's in my book, The Unfolding. Now, since I've tasted trust in life, why would I ever slip again into armor? The armor of an insincere smile, sometimes as dangerous as the armor of a sword. Why would I ever try to know what to say, how to act, how to plan, when, with zero effort of my own, life itself will move through me, will rise up in me to meet itself? Of course, like the child I am, I forget this trust. I slip back into habit, believe I need protection, fear I am isolated, but I have fallen in love with life at a time when that might seem impossible. And that strange fact alone seems enough to remind me to ditch the armor, to cast wide my arms, to unsheathe my heart and say, yes, life, I trust you. I serve you. Why would I not trust life? It would be like a seed evading the rain, like a sunflower just unfurling, trying to avoid the sun. How do we learn to trust life itself? Boy, I just feel like this is the heart of our vulnerability, is to say, yes, life, I trust you, even when I don't like the circumstances. So here are some ideas. Write about a time when you softened and fell in love with life at a time when it felt impossible. That's idea one. Write a letter to yourself about why you might choose to be vulnerable. Or look for examples of vulnerability in the natural world. For instance, the seed, the sunflower, a peony, anemone. What do they have to teach you? All right. Oh, darling, I wish I could say it again. Whatever it was you wanted me to say it again. I have no idea how far back that went, but you will get the video and you'll be able to watch the recording and see it again. The next poem it really brings it into the body. And I've been thinking a lot about how, well, first of all, how I think I wrote poems for decades without remembering I had a body. And one of the most beautiful, profound changes for me in my own writing practice has been to become increasingly aware of the body and how what it has to teach me in a writing practice in life itself. And how a part of vulnerability is to open up with all of our senses, to be wildly alive. And I kind of love this poem by Lisa Owens Vianney. And she's a new poet to me. She's a freelance writer and editor in Berkeley, also the co-founder of Raptors Are the Solution. And this poem is called How to Be Dead. So, really kind of exploring vulnerability through its opposite. How to Be Dead by Lisa Owens Vianney. Do not feel the sun cascading on your shoulders like a warm waterfall as you walk. Do not watch the violent Do not watch the violet green swallows skimming overhead so close that a strand of your hair lifts and falls in their wake. Do not notice the pale green, just emerging leaves of the persimmon tree, the oak trees, the frothy blossoms of the apple tree and the cherry. Do not pet every dog you see on your walk, from the friendliest pit bull Petey to the joyful ball-obsessed cocker spaniel. Do not listen to exquisite music in one ear, birdsong in the other. Refuse to feel the sweetness of it all. That was How to Be Dead by Lisa Owens Vianney. And I kind of love this approach of coming at it from the other way, right? How do you not be vulnerable? How do you not open up to the world as it is? You do that by shutting down. Of course, as we've talked about already, if you're shutting down to all the things that hurt you, you also shut down to all of the things that are beautiful. So I love this poem for this reason, bringing it right into the body. So ideas, write a list of instructions for how not to be vulnerable. Be as hyperbolic or dramatic as you want, or maybe just make very daily examples. Or write a poem that devotes yourself to feeling the sweetness of it all. How do you do this? Make it as sensory as possible. Pull in all of your senses. How will you be vulnerable? And then perhaps wonder what's at stake if you don't. Friends, I'm just going to say I'm going to read a few more poems and then I'll open it up to a conversation. Obviously, your microphones aren't working, so the conversation will be writing questions in the Q&A. Better in the Q&A than the chat bar, just because things might get lost in the chat bar. But if you do have a question that's bubbling up as we're going along, please do find that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and put a question in there. So this next poem is by Michael Kleber Diggs, who I had the joy of meeting while I was teaching in New York last week. And I love this poem that's out of his book, Worldly Things. And it is touching on what happens when we die. Of course, this is our greatest vulnerability of all, right? Is knowing that to be born is to die and that we are all mortal. And I'm sorry, spoiler alert if you hadn't figured that part out yet. So this knowing that we're going to die makes us so vulnerable. And how do we meet that? Are we going to meet it with bravado or perhaps with great humility and vulnerability? How do we know ourselves as small and temporal and mortal? So I love this poem, Gloria Mundi, which means glory to the world, by Michael Kleber Diggs. Come to my funeral dressed as you would for an autumn walk. in the woods. Arrive on your schedule. I give you permission to be late, even without a good cause. If my day arrives when you had other plans, please proceed with them instead and celebrate me there. Keep dancing, tend your gardens, live well, don't stop. Think of me forever assigned to a period, a place, a people. Remember me in stories, not the first time we met, not the last, a time in between. Our moment here is small. I am too a worldly thing among worldly things, one part per 7 billion. Make me smaller still, repurpose my body, mix me with soil and seed, compost for a sapling. Make my remains useful, wondrous. Let me bloom and recede, grow and decay. Let me be lovely yet temporal, like memories, like mahogany. That's Michael Kleber Diggs. Gloria Mundi. And it occurs to me that to write a poem about your own funeral is to know you're going to have one, is to allow yourself to be vulnerable to your own death. What a practice. I love it. So I thought, what if you write a poem inviting people to your funeral and write it from that most vulnerable place? How do you wish they would show up or not show up? What do you most long to say to others about your mortality? Or perhaps begin with a poem, begin with begin your poem with Michael Kleber Diggs's line, "Make me smaller still. How ungrand are you able to ask to be?" Ooh, fun. This will be a moment of paradox later on, friends. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. Oh, this poem. So I'm just thinking now about how do we show up vulnerably in the most difficult times? Meeting our own death is one, and another is when we're meeting great heartbreak, as is the case in this next poem, a literal, when we lose a lover. And I'm going to be reading this poem by one of my most beloved poets, Pablo Neruda. This is a translation from W.S. Merwin, and I love how this poem is an invitation in the writing of the poem itself to go to the hardest place. So the poem is called "Tonight I Can Write the Saddest Lines." Write, for example, "The night is starry and the stars are blue and shiver in the distance. The night wind revolves in the sky and sings. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. I loved her. And sometimes she loved me too. Through nights like this one, I held her in my arms. I kissed her again and again under the endless sky. She loved me, and sometimes I loved her too. How could one not have loved her great, still eyes? Tonight, I can write the saddest lines, to think that I do not have her, to feel that I have lost her, to hear the immense night still more immense without her. And the verse falls to the soul like dew to the pasture. What does it matter that my love could not keep her? The night is starry, and she is not with me. This is all. In the distance, someone is singing. In the distance, my soul is not satisfied that it has lost her. My sight tries to find her as though to bring her closer. My heart looks for her, and she is not with me. The same night whitening the same trees. We of that time are no longer the same. I no longer love her. That is certain. But how I loved her. My voice tried to find the wind to touch her hearing. Another's. She will be another's. As she was before my kisses. Her voice, her bright body, her infinite eyes. I no longer love her, that is certain. But maybe I love her. Love is so short. Forgetting is so long. Because through nights like this one, I held her in my arms, my soul is not satisfied that it has lost her. though this be the last pain that she makes me suffer, and these, the last verses that I write for her. Tonight I can write the saddest lines by Pablo Neruda. Oh, this poem has been one of my most beloved poems for a long time. And part of the reason I love it is just the bravery to sit down and write, tonight I can write the saddest lines, and then to wonder what they are and to notice how they change. You know, you think you can write something true. I do not love her, that is certain. And then you write the next true thing, but maybe I love her. And how these two things that couldn't possibly be true at the same time are true at the same time, and how both of them tear us open. So, some ideas for this poem begin with his title. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. And then be curious, what vulnerable words are you somehow tonight finally ready to say? Or what loss has made you the most vulnerable? What makes your soul not satisfied? What memory do you have that lays you bare, and right into that? And what does that bare moment offer you? All right, I am going to skip a poem. I will send you all the poems, but now you know that you won't actually hear them all. Another example of one of the most difficult vulnerabilities, I think, is to be with someone who we know is going to hurt us. We all know that there are people out there who do want to hurt us. And how do we be vulnerable then? A terrifying, shocking thing to wrestle with. And I love the way that Joy Harjo does this in this poem I'm about to share with you. Joy Harjo, she was the 23rd US Poet Laureate. That was from 2019 to 2022. She's from the Muskogee Nation and was raised in Oklahoma. And this poem touches that most difficult question. How can we be vulnerable with people who are our enemies? This morning, I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It is the heart that asks the question, not the furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. Oh, it's a deeply complex poem, friends. It's a deeply complex question. How do I love my enemy? How do I be vulnerable? Can I find a way to be vulnerable, even in a world that seems hell-bent on hurting me, others? So, questions for this poem. What question does your heart most want to ask about vulnerability? And what question would your mind ask? And how are these questions different? And be curious about that difference. And maybe even begin with Joy Harjo's line, it's the heart that asks the questions, not the furious mind. Or write directions for a ritual about taking care of yourself, even as you are vulnerable. And pray for your enemy. And the last question here, write a whole poem of questions that wonder about the nature of an enemy, and don't answer any of your questions. This will be the last of the poems that I'm going to share tonight, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So this is one that I wrote. And remember how in Michael Kleber Diggs's poem, it's about how, wonder about how small you can be and how does that make us vulnerable? And this is going to be a poem about wondering just how big we can be. And I wrote it, friends, right after I had done an interview with someone in Australia. And in that interview, I was so vulnerable. And after it was over, I got off of the call and I thought, oh, what have I done? Oh no. And the story that I started telling myself was, I am just too much. I am too much for people. My vulnerability is too much. And I got really, oh, I guess scared, shut down about it. The next day, I was talking to my friend Kayleen, and she said, what story are you telling yourself these days? And I said, oh, that I'm too big. I am too much. And this is a poem that came out of that conversation. This is what I heard her say. It's true. You are too much for some, especially those who have not yet learned to carry the sea inside them, especially those who still want to fit their lives into small, dry boxes with tight fitting tops. But there will be some who desperately need you to show up every bit as immense as you are, not one drop smaller. Need you to be unashamedly vast and deep and full of strange things that neither you nor they can understand. Maybe it's just one person who needs you to be that big. Maybe that person is you. It was such a surprise when I got to the end of that poem, friends, and realized that the person who needed me to be vulnerable was me, that it was me. Oh my gosh. Not in service to other people, although it might be that too, but to be in service to the life that it wants to live through us. For this reason, to be vulnerable. So, what is at stake if you do not show up in your own life and for the world as the most honest, vulnerable, fierce, open, generous, authentic version of you? Write a poem that honors your fear about showing up this way, and then perhaps wonder why you might want to do it anyway, despite your fear. That's idea one. And idea two is just to write the poem in which you wonder into what it would look like for you to show up more vulnerably, more big, write about what it would look like and feel like, and just write yourself right into that. All right, that, my friends, is all of the questions that are all of the poems. Well, it's not, I had more, and you're going to get them. You'll get the handout, but those are all the ones that I'm going to share reading tonight. And I'm going to take a peek now at the Q&As. And Bev says, generally, when you are writing, do you have a goal of being vulnerable, or does the vulnerability emerge as you write? What a gorgeous question. Do I have a goal of being vulnerable, or does it just happen? Does it just emerge? Huh. Well, Bev, I think not just when I'm writing, but just but in life itself. And I do feel like writing is just a practice for being alive. I do, I suppose, value vulnerability. And I guess we could say that, yeah, that it could be that I have a goal to just be as curious about what is here as possible. I hadn't thought of it as a goal, but I think it is now that you say that. Also knowing, by the way, that sometimes it's not possible to be super vulnerable. Like the example I come to often in my own mind is the night that my mom went into the hospital with issues with her heart was the night that I wrote a poem about a rubber spatula. It was just too hard. I just couldn't touch it that night sitting down to write. I was not ready. I wasn't able to go there. I wrote one about it the next day, but not that night. It was too much. And I think that that's part of what I was saying earlier, right? I think if we can understand it's okay, right? It's okay to say, oh, I see you. Nope, not right now. And know that you can put it on pause and you can come back when, for whatever reason, you feel like you are in a safer space or in a more able to be vulnerable space. Um, that's I also think that, yes, absolutely, vulnerability emerges as I write. For instance, in that last poem that I just shared, I had no idea when I started that poem that it was going to be a poem about, oh, really, the person I need to be most vulnerable with is me. And I only can arrive at a place like that if the poem is like leading me into these more vulnerable spaces as I'm writing and I'm following it in service to the poem. Oh, Patricia says that Kate Munger has gorgeous music for Wendell Berry's poem. I will write her and ask for it. Thank you for that. And Kara says, I'm working on a book or three. Wow. I don't struggle so much with vulnerability as subject matter that can be triggering. And I want to share mental illness struggles so people who have not been touched may better understand. I've had open conversations with people and they've been astonished and grateful of my vulnerability to help them understand even a little, but I worry things I say could trigger those who are in the depth of their battle. My problem in multiple projects is I cannot figure out how I should write, knowing anyone can be the audience. Do you have certain people in mind when you write a book? So I'm going to give you my answer for this, friend, and I'm sure that other people would give you a very different answer. My answer is to write absolutely selfishly, which is to write the book that you need to write, the book that is so true for you that you can't not write it and not think one bit about your audience, knowing that the right audience is going to self-select for you and that you can't write for anyone else. If here's what happens, if you're writing for someone else, I know this is the advice is think of your audience, write for your audience. I just think that's the worst advice ever. If you are writing for yourself, then it will forever be valuable to you. Chances are, if you're being that honest about your own experience, that it will resonate with other people because it is true, and other people will know the truth of it, and for that reason will be drawn to it. If you are writing it for someone else and they say, "Oh no, that doesn't work for me," what do you have now? You were writing it for them and they said no. So I really believe that when we're doing this kind of writing, anyway, if you are writing for aspirin bottles or for prescriptions, please think of your audience. But if you are writing about the most vulnerable things about what it is to be human, write them for yourself and trust that your experience, if you can be so true about it, will resonate with other people because of the truth of it. And that will be the truth they need. And if it is triggering, as you say, they aren't the ones who are going to come read it. They will stop. They'll put it down. They'll give it away. They'll and know that if it is triggering for them, that's for them to explore. But you need to explore your own truth. When I'm writing a book, I am not thinking about anyone else. I'm really thinking about being very true to my own experience. And I'm sorry that there are three more questions. The video is available forever. You're going to get a link to it in the tomorrow. Larry says, how does vulnerability fit into the experience of joy? I think this is the only way we experience joy is through our vulnerability. I think the wider the window for all of life, the more capacity for joy we have. Can you be vulnerable about everything, or do you hold things back just for yourself? Oh my goodness. Yes, I do hold things back just for myself. I feel like there's a difference between vulnerability and appropriateness. So when I'm sharing things that I write, there are certain things that I'm not going to write about and share um, with the rest of the world, but I would write them for myself. So that's a difference, right? Is between sharing um, and the writing itself. And that, my friends, brings us to the top of the hour. And I thank you for joining me. And I think maybe we'll close with that same song that I sang to bring us in. And if you want to sing along with me, I invite you to do it right there in your own home. I'll just leave a little pause so you can sing too, but we'll sing that little Hafez poem, the version by Danny Ladinsky. How did the rose, how did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all its beauty? Thank you, friends. Thank you for joining me tonight or joining me in big time if you're watching the recording. And I thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful evening. I hope to see you at another thought shop. Oh, thank you, Sarah, for putting some other places. If you are wondering what are other classes or other things you could do, Sarah just put my presentation schedule in the chat bar. You can go there. Thank you. Thank you, friends.